Hello, CTK. Welcome to your second week of Michigan Experience. This week, we are going to learn about the Great Lakes. Included here is another map, which we kind of looked at last week, of the state of Michigan and the surrounding states and all 5 of the Great Lakes, which you can see right there. This week, what I'm going to do is teach you a little trick real quick on how to memorize all 5 of those Great Lakes. And the trick is that if you take the first letter from each of the Great Lakes, it spells the word homes. You put them in this order that you see on the screen: Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Superior. It spells homes. So that's just a cool little trick I even learned way back when I was in elementary school, of how to memorize them. So if this week you're trying to remember all 5 of them, you can be like, okay, it spells homes, and you can try and figure it out that way. Also this week I'm going to include a YouTube song that you guys can listen to, which is very catchy, and that also might help you memorize the 5 Great Lakes. So let's jump into it and talk about our Great Lakes. The first one here I have is Lake Huron. It is the second largest Great Lake in surface area. It's only a little bit smaller than the state of West Virginia. It's got the longest shoreline of the Great Lakes and is home to 30,000 islands. I thought that was amazing. I didn't know that. There's some interesting Ojibwa legends about this lake because a lot of those native people live there. And then I found this really cool picture, which is on your screen right now, of that sunken boat. This is a Fathom 5 National Park. It's really cool. They offer visitors the opportunity to see 22 underwater shipwrecks. There's different ways you can see them. You can take a glass bottom boat tour where they boat you around, and you can even look through the bottom of the boat and see those ships. Or in some places, you can even get in the water and dive down below and try and see them that way. Here's the next lake, Lake Ontario. In the background of this picture, you can actually see the city of Toronto in Canada. It's the smallest of the Great Lakes, and it has a small surface area, but its waters run deep. It holds about 4 times the water volume as Lake Erie, which we'll learn about in just a minute. Some really cool facts I learned about Lake Ontario. As of 2015, about 50 people have successfully swum across the lake. Isn't that cool? The first person who accomplished this feat was a girl named Marilyn Bell, who did it in 1954, and she was only 16 years old. Some of you this week, if you have brothers or sisters in history, you may have heard this person's name I'm about to say. It's a famous baseball player. His name was Babe Ruth. And Babe Ruth hit his first major league home run at Hanlan's Point Stadium in Toronto, this city which you're looking at in the picture. And he hit his first home run, and it landed in Lake Ontario and is rumored to still be there in the water somewhere. So I thought that was a cool little fact. We were reading about Babe Ruth in history this week, so I had to include that in there. Cool facts. Here's our next lake, Lake Michigan. Something that I found really cool is 12 million people live along Lake Michigan's shores, mainly in Chicago and Milwaukee areas, but that's a lot of people who like to live there along that beautiful lake. We learned about this area last week, the Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore, which you see here in the picture, as well as many other protected dunes along the western coast of Michigan, make up the world's largest collection of freshwater sand dunes. And I don't know if you remember this from last week, but the tallest dune here at Sleeping Bear stands about 450 feet above the shore of Lake Michigan. That is so tall. Our next lake, Lake Erie. I also didn't know much about Lake Erie, so this was interesting to read about this and learn some cool facts. It is the warmest of all the Great Lakes, but it also freezes over more than any other lake. That's because it is the shallowest of the Great Lakes. The average depth of Lake Erie is only 62 feet. Lake Erie has a retention time, which retention time basically means it's the measurement of time that water spends in a particular lake. So if you were to measure that, water stays in Lake Erie for only about 2.6 years, which is the shortest of the Great Lakes. And in a second here, I'm going to talk about Lake Superior in comparison. So you will see that it really is a short time in comparison with the other Great Lakes. But here's another major city along the shore. People love to be near water, so a lot of big cities along the Great Lakes. Here is a beautiful picture of the best Great Lake. Sorry, I shouldn't be biased, but I am. I love Lake Superior. So here's a picture of Lake Superior. I think I actually might have even shown the same picture last week, right here at Miners Castle. Some interesting facts about this largest freshwater lake in the world. The average annual temperature of Lake Superior is only 40 degrees Fahrenheit. It's so cold. That makes a lot of sense to me because growing up on Lake Superior, we would, even though it's absolutely beautiful water, you would only go swimming there on the very warmest days of summer. And then you would go out there, you would jump in the water, and your goal was at least to go underneath the water at least once and then get out and said you did it. And you didn't go back in there and swim anymore because it was just so cold. But even though this lake is very cold on average, it rarely freezes over completely. And then it's usually only for a few hours. The last complete freezing of Lake Superior was back in 1979. Although the lake was almost completely frozen over back in 2014. Something that I found out that was pretty interesting, that waves of over 40 feet in height have been recorded on Lake Superior, which is pretty awesome because we're not talking about an ocean, we're only talking about an inland lake. So that's very impressive that it's big enough it can create waves that large. And right here in this lake of Lake Superior, which maybe I'll try and find at a later time, and I'll post a little link if you have time to watch it. There's this surfer called Surfer Dan that will actually surf here in Lake Superior, and he'll even do it in the winter time. He'll come out of the water with these huge icicles on his eyebrows and his mustache, and it's kind of funny, but it's pretty cool that the lake can get waves that large. Its average depth is 83 feet, but its maximum depth is 1,333 feet. That's really deep. Lake Superior is so large and so deep that it has a retention time. Now, if you remember, I just spoke about Lake Erie having a retention time of Erie's was 2.6. Lake Superior's is 191 years. That is so long for the measurement of water that it spends in a particular lake. Just for reference, Lake Michigan, its retention time is 99 years, Huron 22, Ontario 6, and then Erie, which I just said before, is 2.6 years. So no wonder that Lake Superior is called Superior. And here is its superior volume. If you actually took all of the Great Lakes and add them together, you still wouldn't get the volume of Lake Superior. You would have to add up all the Great Lakes plus 4 Lake Eries to get close to the volume of water that is in Lake Superior. Yeah, Lake Superior, it spans 32,000 square miles. It is not only the largest freshwater lake in the world by surface area, but it is also one of the largest lakes in the world, second only to the Caspian Sea. And now in this next slide, I'm going to show you, because we talked about the maximum depth of Lake Superior, meaning how deep the water goes. There, in New York City, is a very tall building called the Empire State Building, which is 1,250 feet tall from ground to roof. So, if you built the Empire State Building in the deepest point of Lake Superior, the only thing that would be peeking out above the waves would be the antenna. Because on top of the Empire State Building, they have this teeny tiny long skinny antenna, which really isn't part of the building, but that would be the only part you might be able to see peeking out of the waves. But I had to post that picture because it gives you reference to understand how deep Lake Superior can be. So as I was learning about the Great Lakes, I learned something really interesting. I learned about a boat with its own zip code. This little boat right here that you see a picture of is called the J.W. Westcott, and it is the only boat with its own zip code. And you might be saying, oh, is this in the Great Lakes? Well, this 45-foot steel boat works 24 hours a day, delivering mail, packages, and sometimes even pizza to the giant lakers that chug daily through the Detroit River, headed anywhere on the Great Lakes. So as you learn about the Great Lakes, you're going to learn about different boats, clipper ships, and these giant boats called lakers. These large boats, which you may have even seen in the Great Lakes before, they carry lots of resources and goods to different cities along the lakeshore. So all of those Great Lakes are connected by waterways, rivers, and passages. They can go from one Great Lake to another. Well, the men who work on those boats are sometimes on those boats for weeks, even months. And so they might not be home for a very long time. And how would you get mail to a boat? Well, all these boats have to travel through the Detroit River. So this boat, as long as they get a letter mailed to this zip code, this boat will get the men or women who work on those huge boats their mail. So I thought that was really cool. They have this book called Mail by the Pail, which they do have a recording on YouTube, but it is a pretty long book. So unless your child is really motivated to sit for it, it's better to read it. So when the library is open, you could get it or get it from the CTK library because we also have it there. But I will also include a short little YouTube video that you guys can watch if you have time this week about that boat as well. So that was the last fact I wanted to share about the Great Lakes. There's lots and lots of information about the Great Lakes that I'd love to share with you guys. But for now, that is going to be it until next week. So for this week, I'm going to include on the Slack channel the Great Lakes Geography song. Also, I'll include that video about the America's Only Floating Zip Code. I'll also include a worksheet on there if you guys have time to complete it with your child. Great. It's a little bit harder, so they probably will need help reading some of the questions and answering the questions. But that's optional. If you have time, great. If not, no sweat. And then I'll also include on there the Great Lake Race. It's a really simple game you can print off. All you need is a little toy as like your piece that you move along, and then 1 or 2 dice. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's easy. They could play it with a sibling or even by themselves if they really wanted to. But that's it. Mrs. Carnes will probably be on here Thursday sharing another short video with you guys. I hope you guys have a fantastic week, and I can't wait to talk to you again next week. All right, thank you.